Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning. Well, it's actually midnight. Hi, you have reached Llorraine Neithardt. This is your host of Venus Unplugged. And what we do here is discover and explore and delight and horrified in the Venusian nature in all of us, the archetype of Venus, of beauty, of art, of myth, of dream. And I have a bit of fire in my head, so I thought, let me do this show tonight because, A, when I get fires in my head, I don't have a good night's sleep because I dream and discover, and so nothing really settles in. And I thought, well, let me just give you the fire in my head that's going on, because I do spend much of Sunday and during the week, what gift can I give? Venus loves to give gifts. Not that I'm Venus, but the Venus within me, or the Venus possessed like I am, loves the gifting, not just receiving, even more so giving. And there's nothing like the gift of imagination or discovery. So I don't know if I mentioned it, but in mid-July I broke my right wrist, and it was a little more broken than I had thought in two places, and bone smash, blah, blah, blah. Had an operation, and for the last 2.5 months, I have 2 more weeks to go, 3 times a week in rehabilitation for the hand, okay? Now, this is posing very interesting dynamics within, because there is part of me that I may not get the full movement in my hand. Thank God I'm left-handed. My right-handed was the hand that got broke, but it may take a year. So I don't know if, making shoes will be part of certainly won't be part of my near future. So I'm creating other possibilities. One of them is writing. Now, I've always written, but I've decided to take a course and be part of that community. But today, I was part of my thought form was practicing, using my right hand. It finally came out of the wrist, out of the brace, and so I decided to paint my little kitchen. I don't know, I think it's called Whispering Angel or some fantastic name that caught my imagination. It's very, very light lilac, quite lovely. So as I was thinking of this, and then I was listening to YouTube and Natalie Goldberg. Now, I don't know if any of you know Natalie Goldberg, but she wrote a book, I think it was 1986, Writing Down the Bones, and she's just a pure delight. I thought, well, I broke my wrist writing down the bones. Okay. And she just talks about, just shut up and write. Or, just shut up and love, or just shut up and get the job done. And she's fantastic. So that then led me to thinking of humility. What is that? What is that about? How does that live in our life? Now, part of, these things that I've been thinking, because then in these writing practices, then you do, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 3 minutes, just like ranting, just writing, don't even think about it, which was really quite marvelous, because some marvelous phrases come out and some horrific memories come out, and some quite beautiful notes from the divine come out too. So the one thing I was thinking about was my spiritual teacher, and part of what she taught me, which of course, in 1980 I didn't really believe it, because it was I couldn't comprehend it, because she said, this journey, little did I know, was going to be my entire life, that I was stepping off the abyss like the divine fool into consciousness, psychospiritual awakening, individuation, whatever one wants to call it. Mystical madness is more like it. There was this concept that, by one really devoting to becoming whole, on whatever path that may be, there's no particularly proper path, you heal 7 generations before you and 7 generations to come. Now that's huge thought. Not to mention huge in the terms of Venus, huge in the terms of the kind of love that entails. It's an incomprehensible love. You can't even call it love because you can't even comprehend it. So I just looked at her, as I did often, and I was in awe of what is this woman talking about? But it never left me, obviously. And it has come to pass to some degree. I see certain changes that wouldn't have happened in family structures or life or whatever it might be. So that's one of the reasons, and certainly when I'm working with people and they're kind of reluctant about their own wholeness, and I say, well, do you want your kids to live your unlived life? Because that's what you're giving them. That usually kind of bulbs people up into consciousness. And so one of the exercises that she gave me, which was in preparing for sleep, she told me, the disciple of the sages should become accustomed to making an accounting of their deeds and their attitudes during the day. And if the heart of the disciple fills up on thinking that he's made an excellent use of his day, then the angels of the 7 heavens pack up all his good deeds into a ball and throw it into the abyss. So you're not even allowed a little bit of inflation. And, sometimes that just does happen. It's like, oh, what a good person I am. And then, the cosmic joker comes knocking at the door. So this instant cancellation of all constructive effort is a source of great regression in both as an individual and as a collective human developing. And the reason is, there's a inflation there, okay? So in the code of the unconscious, which is another marvelous image, unconscious codes, a metaphorical relationship exists between divinity and cooperating among humans. And when humans can free themselves of pride and rancor and just some of the human not such great aspects that we have, a lot begins to happen. So taking up the task of consciousness is a huge undertaking of love. Because there's nothing else that's going to motivate you. I mean, fear could, but you won't get very far with fear. So, in the Kabbalistic system of thinking, which is also a psycho-spiritual, mystical path, there is one concept that the fear of God, right? So what do they mean by the fear of God? And that the fear of God is like in the head, is in wisdom. And now they say that the fear of God is in the ankle, closest to the earth. And so this is all kind of mystical. If you don't understand it, it's overwhelming, of course. But let's say the ankle is the foundation of humility, and that's the fear of God. And, in this Kabbalistic way of learning to think and feel, there's always these kind of conflicts. In some ways, they're almost like active imagination. One side says one thing, the other side says another. That's called the opposites, the tension of the opposites, and we dialogue. So, so in this mystical system, that humility is superior to wisdom, and that the where he's talking about the fear of God, is first to understand the meaning specifically for the concept, of the fear of God. What is this concept? Well, God is not a person or a being, or God is you, God is me, God is what we call the energy. We could call it gravity for the same thing. Well, gravity is God, and when there's this fear of God or the fear of heaven, instead of trying to understand this in kind of the simple words of fear or of God, because we get that all confused, in the psychospiritual language, it's commonly viewed as too archaic. The fear of God, Ten Commandments, going to poke your eyes out, and rip your teeth out. It is kind of scary. But if we see it metaphorically, it also has great truth in it. So the popular image of God as someone who hears and sees everything, that's a product of just childhood and pedagogy, of religious pedagogy, and that most people fail to update with more sophisticated observations of reality. And as we leave childhood behind, we've got to update that understanding. But a translation of this idea would be to say that those who fear God relate to life through the values and notions that transcend logic of immediate gain. Okay? I'm going to run that by you again. That those who fear God relate to life through values and notions that transcend the logic of immediate gain. Now, this expresses extremely subtle feelings and perceptions. And this is what we really, because it's part of what the Cabal is so much about, is these levels, these perceptions, this way. It's not black and white. It's not this or that. It's a bantering, in a sense, within, and certainly between heaven and earth. So when we have childish perceptions and images and associations that appear to contradict spiritual subtle essences, right? This is kind of inevitable. But if we start to recognize, like, where did I get this idea? And though I say this as an adult, what's my image inside? Is it really, I feel bad, which means you feel guilty. If you feel guilty, did you sin? If you missed the mark, was that true? So this is very important stuff to start looking at. And that while on one hand, this is just the way people stand by this kind of infantile idea of spirituality and religion, it's still a method that people need to discover, a method for themselves for their own initiations or to be initiated. So what is that about being initiated? Life experiences, we're being initiated. Every day we're being initiated, whenever we ask ourselves a question. It's an initiation into a new level of understanding. That's one of my obsessions and loves of Venus and being Venus possessed is that the older I get, the more I see and hopefully understand with a little bit of wisdom just how terrified people are of beauty. They do the strangest things to crucify Venus. It never works, but try they might. Okay. So what is a master? The master, that's a model that is the model that we trust. given trust, we seek to understand the kind of psycho-spiritual, for most part, I trust the psycho-spiritual philosophy of Jung. I certainly trust life and some people. So that's, who are, or the master within, to begin to trust oneself for the master within. All right, so given trust, we seek to understand the language. And however many chances we're given at understanding, well, we need a master or a mentor, a book, or a way of understanding, a mirror. All of these, we do the work, but rarely do we get there alone. We need the master and the disciple, right? And that could be within ourselves. It doesn't have to be an external. So the master is the facilitator of these communications, and the disciple is the person who respects and reveres the master and hears in her words or his words and sees in his attitudes many elements beyond comprehension. But because he loves and respects his master, he seeks, often over an entire life, the meaning and the reasons behind those words and acts, as I did with my spiritual teacher when she said, no, if you take on this mantle, if you take on this work, and in a sense you don't even have a choice because you're kind of destined into it, 7 generations before and 7 generations to come. I'm still working that one out. So this is kind of similar to like when a child recognizes its parents' wisdom after years and years after an event, or you find yourself saying the exact thing you swore you would never say, but finally you see the wisdom and your mother's ranting, right? So such revelations, of wisdom is only partly due to what is said or done. Much of it is the result of the reverence or love we hold for our parents, or for the fact that deep inside we refuse to accept that someone as special as a master could say something trivial or act in a frivolous way. And they do. The master is the most dangerous, meaning the most profound, happy danger, I suppose, are the foolish masters. Believe me, they know what they're up to. So much of what we look at, both within and without, of master and disciple, because the true self, with a capital S, is the master. And part of certainly the Jungian work of individuation is to get to know psyche and ego and all these different parts and kind of align them so that the self, the true you, the divine design, has a container to live on the earth with this. So when someone is truly who they are, according to their soul's design or the divine's design, they have a certain freedom. And they've earned it. So what begins to happen is that the master is indispensable to the initiation process, since he or she is the key to the absorption of the concrete notions that only time and maturity allows us to understand in all their depth and subtlety. I still listen to tapes that I had no idea what this woman was saying to me, but it felt right. And I loved her with all my heart. She was quite extraordinary. So, this whole kind of concept. So when we begin to just understand, this kind of concept of, what is this fear? What does it really mean? It's a humility. We're humble. So what that is to say is a fear of God. It's a concept that is difficult to understand without knowing someone who feared God. My teacher did. But it took me a long, long time to understand what she meant. And this is the only way to understand that the term is not about terror, but it's about having great intimacy with God. So the fear of God is not about terror. It's about having great intimacy with God. A master is not a prisoner of dogmas, but someone who can truly daily live, right? Highly influenced or almost totally generated by abstract or subtle principles. She was a master of 13 different systems of numerology. It's where I learned Cabal. Later on with another teacher, alchemy, and certainly the Jungian work. A master is not a prisoner. And when they live this, because they can detach themselves from the dimension of the obvious and the commonplace. In this case, she sees so much further than the obstacles that most people see, or what common people will see as a distance. For them, it's no distance, because she reached wisdom. So for a person to arrive at a fear of God, he must leave behind the cult of the gods of rewards, and the god or the goddess of immediate necessity, and the goddess or goddess of power, personal veneration, and manage to eliminate the childish elements of his symbolic perception of God. And one must do the same with the word fear. Cast off the fear of others, the fear of the self, the fear of Venus, my favorite one, which I would like to free the world from, the fear of pain, to permit himself to feel the fear of only that which he is proper to fear. Only in this way can his fears transform themselves into zeal, into scruples, into morality, having a working moral compass, and fully charging nature of what was earlier perceived as fear, because it transforms. In this sense, fears aren't paralyzing emotions, but in fact, they're extremely energetic and mobilizing, because they're the crown of wisdom. And when we begin to understand this crown of wisdom, at that point, the ability to perceive true reverence in the realm of humility is more of the foundation of what life is about. And this is because humility is the deep internalization of this capacity of transforming itself into the only aesthetic exercise. It's a skill in life. In other words, humble persons can live the fear of God without having to resort to the air of wisdom or proud awareness of being wise. I have it on the greatest authority. Duck, run away. Or, I've never been one for people who say, I didn't even understand it when I first heard it. Was it fake it till you make it? It's like, what do you mean? How do you do that? That always seemed, and I guess some people can do it, just seems way beyond my capacities. So in this tradition of humility, seen at this level, in this way, in this system, it recognizes that although there are many sages in the world, few are true apprentices of humility. Apprentices of humility. And in the Kabbalistic system, there is a belief, and as a matter of fact, there was a book that I read many years ago, and it was about the 36th just. So that in each generation, there are 36 just. So according to the a Kabbalistic tradition, each generation is preserved by the existence of 36 just people. And there was a television show, I think it was called Numbers, and the boy couldn't talk and he did everything through numbers, and I was watching, it was like, wow, whoever wrote this knew their stuff about magic and Kabbalah, and because it was really getting into this kind of concept of the 36 just. So this 36 just is the humble. So to become wise is to be able to erase the unwise fool within us, and to become humble is to erase all trace of the one inside of us that wants to go against our true. And I don't like using higher nature, because higher and lower, that almost limits it. If we could see these things in the round, kind of like the serpent swallowing its tail, this eternal round. It's a very different way to perceive an oscillation rather than above and below and left and right. It's much greater than that. So this, pulling it back to, this writing, which is why I'm up yakking away here at 1 o'clock in the morning. So then I decided to do a 15-minute timed exercise that I got from Natalie Goldberg's Writing Down the Bones about the just, like meeting a just person. Now, these just people, they have no idea that they're holding up a whole generation. It could be anybody, anywhere, anyhow. A no special Black American Express card, or some halo, or, they could probably even be wicked. And yet, they're part of the system, which is kind of an amazing concept. To meet a truly just person who has wisdom and humility. In truth, some people can put on a performance, and they could actually have that, but they're acting in a different way because it's a better teaching. It's like a Zen teaching. You didn't upset them at all. They're just growling. One of my favorite stories with Jung, and they asked him, do you believe in electric shock treatment? He says, yeah, I believe in it. But the humankind, I was like, well, Dr. Jung, what do you mean by the humankind? He said, well, when someone starts with their negative animus or anima, I just growl. And it scares them. And then they now knock it off. So I think that's an incredible way to human shock treatment. Sometimes we could just growl, but consciously, letting others know, get off my tail, or that's not going to fly. It doesn't have to turn into anger. So think about it. Have you ever met a just person? What would that look like? Do you even believe it's possible? You can come from the other side. There's no such thing as 36 just people. Come on. There's billions of people. And that's per generation. And the belief or the teachings is that if something happens to one of these 36 just, the whole generation is screwed. That's how big that concept is. Just a little thought before I go to sleep. So now I can dream my dreams and know that hopefully I have gifted you with some interesting thoughts or insights, or even some little arguments that go off in your head, like, what's that about? Because there's all sorts of ways to find out about the nature of Venus. So, till next week, I gotta bounce. Bye-bye.
Napa know-how. Napa guy knows more isn't always better, unless we're talking about full-size vans. These beasts do more than get you from A to B. They have so much space a man can live in it. With shag carpeting, waterbed, and a sweet lava lamp, these mobile abodes have all the comforts of home. With quality parts and plenty of Napa know-how, you can keep the original tiny house running longer, stronger. That's Napa know-how.
Napa know-how.